The air held the crisp bite of autumn, carrying the scent of wet soil and decaying leaves as I knelt by the river's edge. My pale blonde hair fell forward, creating a curtain between me and the rest of the world, a world that had never truly seen me. The tears came unbidden, silent companions that blended with the rushing water before me, as if the river itself understood my grief. My fingers clutched the small wooden pendant hanging around my neck, a wolf carved by my grandmother, her last gift before she passed. Even in the darkest forest, she'd whispered to me, "You are never truly alone, Eleanor. Remember that." But on this night, as my village prepared for the annual harvest offering, I had never felt more isolated. The ritual was simple in theory. Each family contributed something of value to appease the creatures that ruled the vast forests surrounding our village. The Lycans, wolf shifters of incredible power and ancient lineage, protected us from other, darker threats that lurked beyond our knowledge, asking only for tribute and respect in return. Their king was said to be the most fearsome of all, a being of shadow and fury who had ruled the pack for centuries. I wasn't supposed to be at the river. No one ventured this close to the forest's edge after sundown, especially not on offering night. But after what happened at the village hall, I couldn't bear to stay. "Eleanor will not be participating in this year's offering," Elder Thorne had announced, his voice echoing through the hall as every eye turned to me. "Her contribution has been deemed insufficient." The whispers had started immediately, hushed voices speculating about my family's disgrace, about my own worthlessness. We were already outcasts, my father having disappeared into these very woods 5 years ago, leaving my mother and me to survive on the outskirts of village society. And now, my carefully crafted tapestry, weeks of work depicting the ancient pact between humans and Lycans, had been rejected without explanation. "Better to have nothing from the Hayes family than something unworthy," someone had muttered as I fled, the laughter following me all the way to this forbidden riverbank. The water before me rippled suddenly, breaking my reverie. I froze, listening. The forest had gone silent. No birds, no rustling leaves, no scurrying creatures. Just the river's persistent murmur and my own shallow breathing. That's when I felt it. A presence. Heavy, watchful, dangerous. I rose slowly, my grandmother's pendant warm against my skin as I turned toward the tree line. The darkness between the ancient oaks seemed to shift and breathe, as though the forest itself had awakened. My heart hammered against my ribs, yet something kept me rooted in place rather than fleeing. Perhaps it was resignation. What did I have to run back to after all? A low growl rumbled through the clearing, vibrating the very air around me. From the shadows emerged a massive wolf, its silver-gray fur gleaming like polished metal in the moonlight. But it was the eyes that stole my breath, amber and gold, ancient and intelligent, fixed upon me with an intensity that made my skin prickle. This was no ordinary wolf. Even in my terror, I recognized the creature from our village tales. The Lycan king himself, in his wolf form, twice the size of a normal wolf, with markings that seemed to shimmer with an inner light. He was magnificent and terrifying in equal measure. I should have run. I should have begged for mercy. Instead, I stood transfixed as he approached, each powerful step bringing him closer until I could feel the heat radiating from his massive form. When he was mere inches away, the air around him rippled like heat from a flame, and before my eyes, the wolf transformed. Where the beast had stood now towered a man, if such a being could be called merely a man. Tall and imposing, with the same silver-streaked dark hair as his wolf's pelt, his bare chest covered in intricate tattoos that seemed to move in the moonlight. But his eyes remained unchanged, that same amber gold, burning with something I couldn't name. "You trespass on sacred ground, human," he said, his voice deep and rough, as though he rarely used it for speech. "On this night of all nights, I should have trembled. I should have cowered. But having already faced the rejection of my own kind, what was the wrath of a monster? I have nowhere else to go," I answered simply, another tear escaping despite my efforts to appear strong. His expression shifted, something like surprise crossing his severe features. He moved closer, and I realized with a start that he was scenting me, his head tilting as he captured my fear, my sadness, my resignation on the night air. "You cry," he observed, as though the concept was foreign to him. His hand, large, calloused, tipped with nails that weren't quite claws, reached out, capturing a tear on his fingertip. He studied it with genuine curiosity before his gaze locked with mine again. Why? The question was so unexpected that I answered honestly. My village rejected my offering. They rejected me. Something dangerous flashed in his eyes then. A possessive fury that should have terrified me but instead sent a strange warmth spiraling through my chest. "Show me," he commanded. With trembling hands, I reached into the satchel I'd carried with me and withdrew the folded tapestry. As I unfurled it, the moonlight caught the silver thread I'd painstakingly woven into the design, a wolf king crowned in moonlight, extending a protective paw over a village of humans. It was our history, our covenant, rendered in thread and cloth. The Lycan king stared at it in silence, his expression unreadable. When he finally spoke, his words were not what I expected. "They are fools," he growled, his eyes lifting from the tapestry to my face. "This is worthy." Something shifted in the air between us, a current of energy that made the hairs on my arms stand on end. He stepped closer, until I had to tilt my head back to maintain eye contact. "You know who I am," he stated, rather than asked. I nodded, finding my voice. "You're the Lycan king." A smile that was more predatory than amused crossed his face. "I have a name, little one. It's Raven." The intimacy of knowing his name sent an unexpected thrill through me. No one in our village knew the Lycan king's true name. He was always simply the king, or the alpha in our stories. His next words, however, shattered any momentary comfort. "You belong with me now." My blood turned to ice. "What?" "Your offering has been accepted," he said, gesturing to the tapestry still clutched in my hands. "By me. And I claim not just the gift, but the giver." "You can't. That's not how the ritual works," I stammered, taking a step back only to find the river at my heels. "We give offerings. You provide protection. No one said anything about claiming people." His laugh was dark, almost bitter. "Did you think the original pact was made with crops and trinkets, Eleanor Hayes?" My shock at hearing my full name must have shown on my face. "Yes, I know who you are," he continued. "The daughter of Richard Hayes, the man who ventured into my forest 5 years ago, seeking an audience with me." "My father?" I whispered, my world tilting on its axis. All these years, I'd believed he'd abandoned us, that he'd fled our village for a new life elsewhere. "What happened to him?" Raven's expression hardened. "That is a conversation for another time. Tonight, you have a choice to make. Come with me willingly, or..." He let the alternative hang in the air, unspoken but clear. "Why me?" I asked, desperately trying to understand. "What could you possibly want with me?" His eyes traveled over me slowly, assessing before settling on the wooden pendant at my throat. With surprising gentleness, he reached out to touch it. "Your grandmother carved this," he said. Another statement rather than a question. "Eliza was the last human to understand the true nature of our pact. She knew what your people have forgotten." My fingers closed protectively around the pendant. "What did she know?" "That your village prospers because of blood ties, not trinkets," he said, his voice lower now. "Every generation, one from your bloodline serves as a bridge between our worlds, and now that's... me?" My voice was barely audible over the rush of the river. His smile was grim. "Your father should have been the one. When he failed to honor the pact, I allowed your village time for you to come of age." The implications crashed over me like the winter storms that battered our village. The village elders, do they know this? Some suspect. Others have deliberately forgotten, but they know enough to fear me, to continue the offerings. His hand moved from my pendant to cup my cheek, the heat of his touch startling against my cold skin. "And they know enough to recognize what you are, even if they don't understand why your presence disturbs them so." That explained the whispers that had followed me since childhood, the way the village had slowly pushed my mother and me to the margins after my father's disappearance. They sensed something different about me, something that connected me to the creatures they both needed and feared. "I have nothing left here," I admitted, another tear escaping. "But I know nothing about your world, your ways. I would be just as much an outsider there as I am here." His thumb brushed away the tear, the gesture surprisingly tender from such a fearsome being. "Perhaps. Or perhaps you would finally find where you belong." The weight of the choice pressed down on me. To leave behind everything I'd ever known. To step into a world of ancient magic and primal power, with this dangerous creature as my only guide. Or to return to a village that had already rejected me. To face their scorn, knowing what I now knew about my family's true purpose. Before I could answer, a sound from the village broke through the night. The ceremonial drums signaling the start of the offering procession. Raven's expression darkened. "Your time to choose has run out, little one." He extended his hand to me, those amber eyes glowing in the darkness. "Come." And despite every instinct screaming caution, I placed my hand in his. The moment our skin touched, a jolt of energy raced up my arm, as though lightning had entered my body. Raven's eyes widened slightly, suggesting he'd felt it too. Without warning, he pulled me against his chest, one powerful arm wrapping around my waist. "Hold tight," he growled against my ear. I barely had time to clutch my satchel in the tapestry before he moved, carrying me with inhuman speed into the dark heart of the forest, away from everything I had ever known. The last thing I saw before the trees swallowed us completely was the distant torchlight of the village procession reaching the riverbank, where I had stood just moments before, too late to reclaim what they had carelessly cast aside. Time lost meaning as we raced through the forest. The world blurred around me, dark trees, patches of moonlight, the occasional startled animal leaping out of our path. Raven moved with impossible grace and speed, his arms secure around my waist as he navigated terrain that would have been treacherous for me alone. I kept my face pressed against his chest, partly from necessity, and partly because the cold night air stung my tear-stained cheeks. Eventually, the trees began to thin, and I sensed we were approaching a clearing. When Raven finally slowed to a stop, I raised my head, gasping at the sight before me. We stood at the edge of a vast clearing, dominated by what could only be described as a fortress built into the side of a mountain. Constructed of dark stone and massive timber, it rose several stories high, with turrets and balconies jutting out at various levels. Torches lined the walls, their flames dancing in the night breeze, casting the structure in flickering amber light that made it seem alive and breathing. "Welcome to Wolf's Hollow," Raven said, his voice tinged with something like pride as he set me on my feet. "Home of the Northern Pack for 12 generations. I stood unsteadily, my legs numb from the journey and my mind overwhelmed by the sight. "It's not what I expected." A short, bark-like laugh escaped him. "What did you expect? Caves and animal skins?" "Perhaps," I admitted, my honesty drawing another surprised look from him. "Our village stories aren't very specific about where Lycans live. Just that you rule the forest. We rule much more than that," he replied cryptically, placing a hand at the small of my back to guide me forward. "Come. The night grows cold, and there is much to explain." As we approached, I noticed movement along the fortress walls, shadows shifting, eyes gleaming in the darkness. We were being watched by sentries whose forms seemed to flicker between human and wolf, never fully one or the other. A shiver ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the autumn chill. The massive wooden gate swung open at our approach, revealing a courtyard bustling with activity despite the late hour. People, Lycans in human form, moved with purpose, carrying supplies, tending to tasks, or gathering in small groups for conversation. They all paused as we entered, conversations dying mid-sentence as every eye turned to us. To me. I fought the urge to shrink behind Raven, to hide from their curious and sometimes hostile stares. My fingers found my grandmother's pendant again, drawing comfort from its familiar shape as Raven led me through the parting crowd. "My king." A tall woman with fiery red hair stepped forward, her expression carefully neutral as her eyes flicked between Raven and myself. "We did not expect you to return with company." "Serena?" Raven acknowledged her with a slight nod. "This is Eleanor Hayes. She will be staying with us, permanently." The woman, Serena, didn't bother to hide her shock, her green eyes widening before narrowing with calculation. Haze? As in, yes. Raven cut her off. Precisely as in, have chambers prepared in the east wing, and find something suitable for her to wear. I glanced down at my simple wool dress, suddenly aware of how shabby it must appear compared to the well-crafted leather and woven garments the Lycans wore. A flush crept up my neck. Of course, my king, Serena replied. Though her tone suggested she had many questions, she was restraining herself from asking. With a gesture, she summoned 2 younger women who approached cautiously. This is Ivy and Nora, she introduced. They will attend to your guest's needs while I make the arrangements. She is not a guest, Raven corrected, his voice carrying through the now silent courtyard. She is under my protection and will be accorded the respect that position demands. Is that understood? Something in his tone made even the most curious onlookers avert their eyes and return to their tasks with sudden enthusiasm. Serena bowed her head in acknowledgement. As you wish, my king. Raven turned to me then, his expression softening almost imperceptibly. Go with them. Get cleaned up. Eat something. I have matters to attend to, but I will come for you later. It wasn't a request, and despite the flutter of anxiety in my stomach at the thought of being separated from the only creature I knew in this strange place, I nodded. What about my tapestry? I asked, realizing I was still clutching it tightly. A genuine smile touched his lips then, brief but transformative, making him look suddenly younger and less fearsome. Keep it safe. It is yours until the next full moon, when it will be properly honored in our own ceremony. With that cryptic statement, he turned and strode away, several advisors immediately falling into step beside him, speaking in urgent, hushed tones. I watched him disappear through an archway before Ivy and Nora gently guided me in the opposite direction. This way, miss, Ivy said, her voice gentle despite the wary look in her eyes. She appeared to be close to my age, with warm brown skin and dark curls pulled back from her face. You must be tired from your journey. Such a simple word for the complete upheaval of my life. They led me through a series of corridors and up 2 flights of stairs before stopping at a heavy wooden door carved with intricate wolf designs. Nora, a willowy blonde with sharp features, pushed it open to reveal a chamber far more luxurious than anything I had ever seen in my village. A large bed dominated one wall, piled high with furs and woven blankets in rich, deep colors. A fire already crackled in the stone hearth, casting the room in warm light and chasing away the autumn chill. Through another doorway, I glimpsed a bathing chamber with what appeared to be a system of pipes bringing hot water directly into a copper tub. The king has placed you in the east wing, Ivy explained, moving to stoke the fire. These are honored quarters. Why would he... I began, but Nora interrupted. It's not our place to question the king's decisions, she said, her tone making it clear that it shouldn't be mine either. A bath will be prepared and food brought up. Is there anything specific you require? I shook my head, suddenly overwhelmed by the reality of my situation. Less than 2 hours ago, I had been kneeling by the river, an outcast in my own village. Now I stood in a Lycan fortress, apparently under the personal protection of their king, surrounded by luxuries I'd never imagined. I need a moment, I managed. The 2 exchanged glances before Nora nodded. We'll return shortly with food and fresh clothing. The bathing chamber is through there if you wish to refresh yourself. Yeah. After they left, I sank onto the edge of the bed, the softness of it so unfamiliar, it almost felt wrong against my body accustomed to a straw mattress. I carefully set my tapestry aside and buried my face in my hands, allowing myself the luxury of fear and doubt now that I was alone. What had I done? What was happening? Why had Raven claimed me? And what did it mean to be under his protection? The questions swirled in my mind, unanswered and daunting. My fingers found my grandmother's pendant once more. Even in the darkest forest, you are never truly alone. I whispered her words aloud, drawing strength from them. She had known. Somehow, my grandmother had known this day would come, that I would find myself here, among the creatures of the forest. Had she been preparing me all along with her stories and cryptic warnings? A knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. Before I could answer, it swung open to reveal Serena, the red-haired woman from the courtyard. She carried a bundle of clothing in her arms, her expression unreadable as she studied me. "So, you're Richard's daughter," she said, without preamble. "You have his eyes." The mention of my father sent a jolt through me. "You knew him?" She placed the clothes on the bed beside me, keeping a careful distance. Everyone in Wolf's Hollow knew Richard Hayes. He was a frequent visitor for almost 2 years before he disappeared. My heart raced. Raven said he came seeking an audience. What happened to him? Is he? I couldn't bring myself to finish the question. Serena's expression hardened. "That's not my story to tell, but know this, Eleanor Hayes. Your presence here stirs old wounds and older secrets. There are those among us who will not welcome you, regardless of the king's decree." "Why?" I asked, finding my courage. "What did my father do that was so terrible?" She hesitated, conflict evident in her eyes. "He made promises he couldn't keep, and in our world oaths are binding unto death." She gestured to the clothing. "These should fit. Ivy and Nora will return with food and help you settle in." As she turned to leave, I called after her. "Serena, please. I know nothing about this world, about why I'm here. I need to understand." She paused at the doorway, her back to me. "The king brought you here for a reason, and it wasn't charity. Ask him your questions, but be prepared. You may not like the answers." With that ominous warning, she left, the heavy door closing behind her with finality. Alone again, I moved to examine the clothes she'd brought. Soft leather leggings, a tunic of deep green woven fabric, and a heavy cloak lined with fur. All finer than anything I'd ever owned. All clear signs that I was not expected to leave anytime soon. I carried them into the bathing chamber, where I found the copper tub already filled with steaming water scented with herbs. The luxury of it was almost overwhelming after years of bathing in the cold river, or with water heated in kettles over our modest hearth. As I sank into the warm water, I tried to sort through everything that had happened. My village had rejected me, the Lycan king had claimed me, and somewhere in between lay the truth about my father's disappearance. Nothing made sense, yet somehow, beneath my fear and confusion, I felt something else stirring, a sense that I was exactly where I was meant to be. I washed away the tear stains and river mud, scrubbing my pale blonde hair until it shone in the firelight. By the time Ivy and Nora returned with trays of food, roasted meat, fresh bread, fruits I didn't recognize, I was dressed in the clothes Serena had provided, surprised by how well they fit my slender frame. "You clean up well for a village girl," Nora remarked, setting down her tray. The comment could have been insulting, but her tone held something closer to reluctant approval. "Thank you," I replied, unsure what else to say. "The clothes are beautiful." Ivy smiled slightly. "The green suits you. It brings out the gold in your eyes." I touched my face self-consciously, unused to such observations. In the village, drawing attention to one's appearance was considered vain and impractical. "The king sent word that he will come to escort you to the evening meal," Nora added, arranging the food on a small table by the fire. "You should eat something now, though. It will be several hours before the pack gathers." "The pack?" I echoed. "Yes, the entire northern pack," Ivy explained. "It's unusual for all members to dine together except on special occasions, but the king has ordered it tonight. Because of me," I realized aloud. The two exchanged glances again. "Because he wishes to make an announcement," Nora corrected carefully. "Now eat. You'll need your strength." I didn't argue, suddenly aware of my hunger. The food was rich and flavorful. The meat seasoned with herbs I couldn't identify. The bread still warm from the ovens, the fruit sweet and juicy. I ate slowly, savoring each bite while Ivy and Nora moved around the chamber, lighting more candles as evening descended outside. "Will you tell me about the pack?" I asked between mouthfuls. "About how you live here." Ivy looked uncertain, but Nora shrugged. "What's to tell? We are what we are. We hunt, we protect our territory, we honor the old ways. Some of us shift easily between forms. Others remain mostly human except during the full moon." "Are you born this way?" I asked hesitantly. "Most are," Ivy said, warming to the conversation despite her earlier caution. Lycan blood is dominant. If either parent is a Lycan, the child will be too. But there are rare cases where humans have been turned. Turned? The word sent a chill through me. It's uncommon, Nora interjected, shooting Ivy a warning look. And dangerous. Many don't survive the transition. Before I could ask more questions, a heavy knock at the door silenced us all. Without waiting for a response, Raven entered, now dressed in more formal attire, a dark tunic embroidered with silver thread, fitted black trousers, and a heavy cloak clasped with a silver wolf's head brooch. His eyes found mine immediately, assessing me in my new clothes with an intensity that made heat rise to my cheeks. "Leave us," he commanded, and Ivy and Nora immediately bowed and exited, closing the door behind them. Alone with him once more, I felt the same mixture of fear and inexplicable connection I'd experienced by the river. He moved further into the room, his presence seeming to shrink the space around us. "You have questions," he stated, coming to stand before me as I rose from my seat. "I see them in your eyes. Hundreds," I admitted, finding my voice. "But I'll start with the most pressing. What happened to my father?" A shadow crossed Raven's face at my question, his jaw tightening visibly. For a moment, I thought he might refuse to answer. Instead, he moved to the window, gazing out at the darkened forest as he spoke. "Your father came to Wolf's Hollow 5 years ago, as I told you. But it wasn't his first visit." Raven's voice was measured, controlled. Richard Hayes had been coming to the Boundary Stone since he was a young man, leaving messages, seeking contact. Eventually, I granted him an audience. "Why would he do that?" I asked, struggling to reconcile this information with the quiet, withdrawn father I remembered. Raven turned back to face me. "Because of your grandmother. Eliza Hayes was a keeper of the old knowledge, one of the few humans who remembered the true nature of our pact. She raised your father to understand his responsibility. The bridge between worlds," I murmured, recalling his earlier words. "Yes." His amber eyes held mine steadily. "For generations, one member of your bloodline has served as liaison between your village and my pack. They would come to us with the concerns of your people and return with our guidance. They were respected by both sides." I moved closer, drawn by the gravity of his words, "And my father was meant to continue this tradition." "He was. But your village had already begun to forget, to distrust. The elders resisted his attempts to fulfill his role." Raven's expression darkened. "And then he met your mother. The way he said it suggested a complication, a deviation from some predetermined path. She knew nothing of this legacy," Raven continued. "Richard loved her, but feared telling her the truth. He tried to balance both worlds, his duty to the pack and his life in the village, but the strain became too great, especially after you were born." My heart quickened. "Me? What do I have to do with it?" Raven's eyes softened slightly. "From the moment of your birth, your father knew you were special. Like your grandmother, you carried a strong connection to our world. Stronger, perhaps, than even his. He became protective, fearful of what it might mean for you. So he stopped coming here," I concluded. "For a time. But the bond between our worlds cannot be severed so easily." The village began to suffer. Failed crops, illness, increased threats from other forest creatures we normally kept at bay. Richard realized he needed to renew the pact, to ensure your village's safety. "So he returned," I said, the pieces beginning to fall into place. 5 years ago." Raven nodded. "He came with an offer, himself in permanent service to the pack, in exchange for continued protection for the village and a promise that you would be left alone, free to live a normal human life." The revelation struck me like a physical blow. My father hadn't abandoned us. He'd sacrificed himself for us. "But something went wrong," I whispered, reading the tension in Raven's posture. "Yes." His voice grew colder. "On the night he was to formalize his pledge to the pack, there was an attack. A rival pack from the south, seeking to claim our territory, infiltrated Wolf's Hollow. Your father was caught in the fighting." My breath caught. "Is he?" "He was gravely injured," Raven said, his expression unreadable. "To save his life, I offered him the turning, to become one of us." The world seemed to tilt beneath my feet. My father is a Lycan now? He survived the initial transformation, which few humans do, Raven replied carefully. But the change? It affected his mind. Many who turn later in life struggle to reconcile their human memories with their new nature. Where is he? I demanded, my voice rising. I want to see him. That isn't possible right now. Raven stepped closer, his imposing height forcing me to look up at him. Your father retreated deep into the wild territories to the north soon after his turning. He returns occasionally, but he's not the man you remember, Eleanor. The wolf has claimed much of him. Tears pricked my eyes again, but I blinked them back fiercely. Why didn't anyone tell me? My mother mourned him for years, believing he'd abandoned us. That was his choice, Raven said, not unkindly. He believed a clean break would be easier than the truth, and he extracted a promise from me, that you would be allowed to reach adulthood among your own kind before being told of your heritage. But why bring me here now? I asked, the most crucial question of all. Why not just continue protecting the village from afar? Raven's expression changed then, something almost vulnerable flashing across his features, before his usual mask of control returned. Because the pact is weakening, your village has forgotten too much, grown too distant from us. And without a haze to renew the bond. He let the implication hang in the air between us. So I'm here to be the new liaison? To take my father's place? The idea was simultaneously terrifying and oddly compelling. In a manner of speaking, Raven paused, seeming to weigh his next words carefully. But there is more to it than that. The position you would hold is significant. Before he could elaborate, another knock interrupted us. Serena's voice came through the door. My king, the pack has assembled in the Great Hall. They await you and... A slight pause. Your guest... Raven's jaw tightened momentarily before he called back. We will be there shortly. He turned back to me, extending his hand. There is much more to discuss, but it must wait. Tonight, you will be introduced to the pack. I stared at his outstretched hand, my mind reeling from all I'd learned. My father alive but transformed. My family's hidden legacy, a deteriorating pact between two worlds. And still, I sensed there were crucial pieces missing from the puzzle. What will you tell them about me? I asked, making no move to take his hand. A small, enigmatic smile curved his lips. The truth. That you are the Hayes heir, and vital to our future. His hand remained extended. Come, Eleanor. It's time to claim your birthright. Something in his tone sent a shiver down my spine. Not entirely from fear. After a moment's hesitation, I placed my hand in his, feeling again that spark of energy where our skin met. As we walked through the corridors of Wolf's Hollow, Lycan stopped and bowed their heads to Raven, their curious eyes following me with expressions ranging from open hostility to cautious interest. I walked taller under their scrutiny, determined not to show weakness. Whatever role I was meant to play in this world, I would not begin it cowering. The Great Hall proved to be an enormous chamber with a vaulted ceiling supported by massive timber beams. Long tables arranged in a U-shape filled the space, already crowded with Lycans of all ages. At the head of the U stood a raised dais with two ornate chairs, thrones, really, carved from dark wood and adorned with silver. Our entrance caused a ripple of silence to spread through the hall as hundreds of eyes turned toward us. Raven led me through the center of the U, his hand still holding mine, until we reached the dais. Only then did he release me, turning to face the assembled pack. My people... His voice carried effortlessly through the vast space. Tonight marks a turning point in the history of the Northern Pack. For too long, our connection to the human settlements has weakened, the old packs fading from memory. Murmurs spread through the crowd, some nodding in agreement, others watching with wary eyes. But the wheel turns, Raven continued, and what was lost returns to us. He gestured toward me. I present to you Eleanor Hayes, daughter of Richard, granddaughter of Eliza, last of the Hayes bloodline. The murmuring grew louder, and I caught fragments of whispered conversations. Hayes woman, the missing liaison, the prophecy. That last word sent another chill through me. What prophecy? Eleanor will remain with us at Wolf's Hollow, Raven announced, his tone making it clear this was not open for debate. She will be accorded all the respect and protection due to her position. Any who challenge this decree challenge me directly." The threat hung in the air, silencing even the whispers, but one voice broke the quiet. A tall, muscular man with a jagged scar running down one side of his face stepped forward from the crowd. "My king," he began, his deep voice tinged with barely restrained anger. "With all due respect, you cannot expect us to welcome a human into our midst so easily. The Hayes line has been absent for 5 years. The father abandoned his duty. Why should we trust the daughter?" Raven's expression remained impassive, but I sensed a dangerous energy building in him. "You question my judgment, Victor?" The scarred man, Victor, stood his ground. "I question bringing an untested human into the heart of our territory when tensions with the Southern Pack are already high. If she truly carries the Hayes blood, let her prove her worth." Whispers of agreement rippled through sections of the crowd, and I felt the weight of their doubt pressing against me. But rather than diminishing me, their skepticism ignited something deep inside, a spark of defiance, of pride. Before Raven could respond, I stepped forward. "My father did not abandon his duty," I said, my clear voice carrying across the suddenly silent hall. "He sacrificed his human life to maintain the pact between our worlds. I may not have known of my heritage until today, but I stand before you now, ready to honor the legacy of my bloodline." Victor's eyes narrowed, pretty words from a pretty mouth. But the Hayes liaison must possess more than just the blood. They must have the sight, the connection. Without it, you're just a human girl playing at powers beyond your understanding. "The sight?" I echoed, glancing at Raven in confusion. Raven's expression had changed, a glimmer of something like pride in his amber eyes as he watched me stand my ground. He stepped beside me, his presence solid and reassuring. "Eleanor has the sight," he stated with absolute certainty. "Stronger, perhaps, than any Hayes before her. She will prove it at the full moon ceremony." The full moon. Just 3 nights away. What test awaited me then? What powers was I supposed to possess? Victor's jaw clenched, but he bowed his head slightly. "As you wish, my king. We will wait for the ceremony before passing judgment." With the challenge temporarily deflected, Raven guided me to one of the ornate chairs on the dais. As I sat, uncomfortable with being on display but determined not to show it, servants began bringing out platters of food and pitchers of wine. "You did well," Raven murmured, taking the seat beside me. "They need to see your strength. What is this sight Victor spoke of?" I whispered back. "What am I supposed to prove at the ceremony?" Raven's hand covered mine briefly on the armrest between us. "We'll speak of it later. For now, eat. Meet the pack. Show them you belong here." As the meal progressed, various Lycans approached the dais to introduce themselves. Some were openly curious, others politely reserved, and a few made no attempt to hide their distrust. I met each interaction with as much dignity as I could muster, storing away names and faces, bits of pack history and hierarchy that might help me navigate this new world. The feast continued late into the night. Despite the initial tension, the atmosphere gradually shifted as wine flowed and stories were shared. I watched the Lycans interact, their mannerisms sometimes startlingly human, other times distinctly wolf-like in their physicality. They touched often, casual brushes of hands or shoulders that seemed important to their social bonds. Their laughter was loud and uninhibited, their arguments passionate but quickly resolved. Throughout the evening, I caught Raven watching me, gauging my reactions. Each time our eyes met, that strange current passed between us, a recognition I couldn't explain. It was well past midnight when he finally stood, signaling an end to the festivities. "Rest well, my pack," he announced. "Tomorrow brings preparations for the full moon ceremony." As the hall began to empty, Raven turned to me. "You've endured enough for one day. I'll escort you back to your chambers." The walk through the now quiet corridors felt different, more intimate somehow. Exhaustion weighed on me, the events of the day catching up all at once. When we reached my door, I expected Raven to leave immediately. Instead, he hesitated. "You handled yourself well tonight," he said. His deep voice softened. "The pack respects strength and conviction, both of which you demonstrated." "I still don't understand what's expected of me," I admitted. This sight, the ceremony, I'm walking blind, Raven. The use of his name rather than his title seemed to please him, a subtle shift in his expression that I was learning to recognize. Rest tonight, he said. Tomorrow I'll show you what it means to be a haze among wolves. He reached out, his fingers lightly brushing a strand of pale blonde hair from my face. The touch was brief, but sent warmth cascading through me. Before I could react, he turned and strode away, leaving me staring after him, my skin still tingling where his fingers had been. Inside my chambers, I found the fire still burning low, the bed turned down invitingly. Despite my exhaustion, sleep eluded me for hours as I replayed the day's events in my mind. My father, transformed and changed, my grandmother's secret knowledge, the mysterious sight I supposedly possessed, and Raven, enigmatic, powerful, and inexplicably connected to me in ways I couldn't fathom. When sleep finally claimed me, my dreams were filled with wolves running through moonlit forests, and amber eyes watching from the shadows. Morning arrived with soft golden light, filtering through windows I'd been too overwhelmed to notice the night before. I rose, finding fresh water for washing and new clothes laid out. Similar to yesterday's, but in deep blue, that reminded me of the river where everything had changed. A knock at the door revealed Ivy, bearing a tray of breakfast. "The king asks that you join him in the courtyard when you're ready," she said, setting down the tray. "He said to take your time, but..." She hesitated. "But what?" I prompted. "He seemed eager," she finished with a small smile. "It's unusual. The king is patient in most things." I felt a flutter in my stomach at her words, a mixture of nervousness and something warmer. "Thank you, Ivy. I won't keep him waiting long." After a quick breakfast, I made my way through the fortress, remembering the path from the previous night. The morning light transformed Wolf's Hollow, revealing details I'd missed in the darkness. Intricate carvings on support beams, woven tapestries depicting forest scenes, windows of colored glass that cast rainbow patterns on stone floors. The courtyard bustled with morning activity, but Raven stood apart, easily identifiable by his height and the deference others showed him. He wore simpler clothes today, a leather tunic over a linen shirt, fitted trousers, and boots well worn from use. He looked less like a king and more like a warrior. He spotted me immediately, as though some sixth sense alerted him to my presence. "You slept well?" he asked as I approached. "Eventually," I answered honestly. "There's much to process." He nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Today will bring more, I'm afraid. But necessary knowledge if you're to stand firm at the ceremony." He gestured toward the fortress gates. "We ride out in 10 minutes. I want to show you something important." "Ride?" I echoed, anxiety spiking through me. "I've never been on a horse." This drew a genuine laugh from him, transforming his severe features into something almost boyish. "The village truly has forgotten much. The Hayes family were once renowned riders." His eyes glinted with amusement. "Don't worry. You'll ride with me until you learn." True to his word, minutes later I found myself seated in front of Raven on a massive black stallion, his arms around me to hold the reins. The position forced an intimacy that sent heat to my cheeks, his chest solid against my back, his breath occasionally brushing my hair. We rode through the forest at a steady pace, Raven occasionally pointing out landmarks or explaining territories. 2 other Lycans, Serena, and a quiet, watchful man introduced as Elias, accompanied us, riding a short distance behind. "Where are we going?" I finally asked after nearly an hour of travel. "To the heart of your heritage," Raven replied cryptically, "the place where human and Lycan first made their pact centuries ago." The forest gradually changed around us, the trees growing older and more massive, their canopies forming a cathedral-like ceiling above. Light filtered through in dappled patterns, and the usual forest sounds seemed muffled, as though the very air commanded respect. Eventually, we reached a perfect circle of ancient standing stones, each twice the height of a man and covered in weathered carvings. In the center stood a stone altar, flat-topped and worn smooth by centuries of use. Raven dismounted first, then reached up to help me down, his hands spanning my waist effortlessly. The touch lingered a moment longer than necessary before he set me on my feet. "This is the Moonstone Circle," he explained, leading me between 2 of the massive stones. Every Haze liaison has been initiated here since the original pact was formed. I approached the central altar, drawn to it instinctively. The stone felt warm beneath my palm despite the cool autumn air. What happened here? How did the pact begin? Raven gestured for Serena and Elias to remain at the perimeter before joining me at the altar. Nearly 500 years ago, both our peoples faced extinction. He began, his voice taking on the cadence of a tale often told. A darkness was spreading through the land. Not just war or disease, but something more insidious, something that corrupted the very soil and water. I listened, entranced, as he continued. The first Lycan king, my ancestor, realized that neither humans nor Lycans could defeat this darkness alone. He sought out the wisest among the human settlements, a woman named Mara Hayes. My breath caught. My ancestor. Raven nodded. Mara possessed what humans then called the old sight, the ability to perceive energies invisible to others, to communicate with the natural world in ways most could not. Together, they performed a ritual in this very circle, binding our people's fates. What kind of binding? I asked, my fingers tracing the worn carvings on the altar's edge. A blood bond, Raven answered simply. Mara Hayes offered her blood willingly, as did the Lycan king. Their sacrifice purified the land, driving back the darkness. But such powerful magic created a permanent link, one that requires renewal by each generation. Understanding dawned. And that's what my father was supposed to do. What I'm supposed to do now. Yes. Raven moved closer, his presence warming the air between us. At each full moon, the Haze liaison would come here to renew the bond, ensuring the continued balance between our worlds. Without that renewal, he gestured to a withered patch of ground just outside the stone circle. The darkness begins to return. I stared at the dead earth, a chill running through me. And you believe I have this sight? This connection to the land? Instead of answering directly, Raven took my hand, guiding it to rest flat on the altar stone. Close your eyes, he instructed, his voice low near my ear. Don't think. Just feel. What does the stone tell you? I wanted to protest, to insist I couldn't possibly know what he meant. But something in his tone stopped me. I closed my eyes, focusing on the sensation of stone beneath my palm. At first I felt nothing but smooth, sun-warmed rock, but gradually, something else emerged. A subtle vibration, a rhythm like a heartbeat, slow and ancient. With it came flashes of sensation. The scent of blood and herbs, whispered words in a language I'd never heard yet somehow understood. The feel of moonlight on skin. My eyes flew open, my breath coming fast. It's alive, I whispered in awe. The stone. It remembers. Satisfaction gleamed in Raven's amber eyes. Yes, what else? Emboldened, I placed both hands on the altar, closing my eyes again. This time the sensations came stronger. Glimpses of faces, hundreds of them across centuries. Men and women with eyes like mine, standing where I now stood, my ancestors, the Haze liaisons who came before. And with their memories came knowledge, flowing into me like water finding its level. I understood suddenly what the sight truly was, not just the ability to perceive energies, but to direct them, to serve as a conduit between the human world and the wild magic of the Lycans. I see them, I breathed, opening my eyes to find Raven watching me intently. My ancestors, they stood here, just as I do now. And you feel it? The connection? There was an urgency in his question I didn't fully understand. Yes, I admitted, unable to deny the truth humming through my veins. It's like waking up to a part of myself I never knew was sleeping. Relief washed across his features, quickly masked. Good. Victor and those who support him cannot deny your legitimacy if you can demonstrate the sight at the ceremony. I withdrew my hands from the altar, the connection fading but not disappearing entirely. What exactly will happen at this ceremony? You keep mentioning it, but explaining nothing. A shadow passed over his expression. The renewal ritual is demanding. It requires both blood and will from the Haze liaison. And this time, after 5 years of neglect, it will require more than usual. Blood? I repeated, my earlier confidence wavering. A token amount, he assured me. though something in his eyes suggested he wasn't telling me everything. The real challenge is channeling the energies correctly. Even with the sight, it takes focus and strength. And if I fail? The question escaped before I could stop it. Raven's jaw tightened. You won't. But if I did, then the darkness spreads. He cut me off, gesturing again to the withered ground. First to your village, then outward. Crops fail, illness spreads, minds turn against each other. And eventually, worse things emerge from the shadows. The weight of responsibility settled heavy on my shoulders. So no pressure. I attempted humor, my voice slightly shaky. Unexpectedly, Raven's hand came up to cup my cheek, his touch gentle despite the calluses on his palm. You are stronger than you know, Eleanor Hayes. I saw it in you by the river, a resilience that rivals any wolf's. The compliment warmed me from within, chasing away some of the cold dread his words had inspired. I'll need you to show me how, I said quietly. I can't do this alone. You won't be alone, he promised, his thumb brushing lightly across my cheekbone. Not anymore. The moment stretched between us, charged with something I wasn't ready to name. Finally, he stepped back, breaking the spell. There's more you need to see before we return, he said, his voice returning to its usual commanding tone. The boundary stones where your village leaves its offerings. You should understand the full extent of your new responsibilities. As we rode away from the Moonstone Circle, I glanced back once, seeing the ancient stones now with new eyes. They were no longer just relics of a forgotten past, but anchors of my future, a future suddenly filled with magic, danger, and a wolf king whose golden eyes followed me even in dreams. The 3 days leading up to the full moon passed in a blur of preparation and revelation. Each morning, Raven would come for me, taking me to different sacred sites throughout the territory. Boundary stones, ancient groves, hidden springs, each pulsing with the same energy I'd felt at the Moonstone Circle. With each visit, my sensitivity to these energies grew stronger, more refined. The sight developing like a muscle long unused suddenly called to action. In the afternoons, Serena would instruct me in the history and customs of the pack, her initial wariness gradually softening as she witnessed my genuine desire to learn. The evenings were spent with the elders of Wolf's Hollow, learning the words and movements of the renewal ritual until they were carved into my memory. Throughout it all, Raven remained close, his guidance firm yet patient. Each time our hands touched during training, that same spark passed between us, growing more familiar, but no less potent. I caught him watching me often, his expression unreadable yet intense, as though trying to solve a puzzle only he could see. The night before the ceremony, unable to sleep despite my exhaustion, I slipped from my chambers and made my way to the battlements. The fortress was quiet, most of the pack already retreated to prepare for tomorrow's important ritual. The autumn air bit at my skin as I found a secluded spot overlooking the forest, the nearly full moon casting everything in silver light. You should be resting. Raven's voice came from behind me, startling me from my thoughts. I turned to find him approaching, his silver-streaked hair gleaming in the moonlight. I couldn't sleep. Too many thoughts. He nodded in understanding, coming to stand beside me at the stone parapet. For several minutes, we simply existed in comfortable silence, gazing out at the moonlit forest. Are you afraid? He finally asked, his voice softer than usual. Yes, I admitted, seeing no point in pretense. But not of the ritual itself. I'm afraid of what comes after. He turned to look at me, brows drawn together. What do you mean? I gathered my courage, voicing the question that had been building in me for days. Once the bond is renewed, what happens to me? Do I return to the village as liaison? Do I stay here? What exactly will my role be? Raven was silent for a long moment, his amber eyes studying my face as though memorizing it. When he spoke, his words were careful, measured. The traditional role of the Hayes liaison was to move between worlds, spending time in both the village and Wolf's Hollow. But things have changed. Your village has grown hostile to our ways, and tensions between Lycan packs have increased. The position you would hold is more permanent. Permanent? I echoed. my heart quickening. He turned fully toward me then, his imposing frame blocking the moonlight. Eleanor, there's something I haven't told you. Something about the original pact between Mara Hayes and the first Lycan king. The intensity in his voice made me straighten, suddenly alert. What is it? They weren't just allies, they were mates. The word hung in the air between us, laden with meaning I was only beginning to understand. Each generation, Raven continued, his voice low and intense. The Hayes liaison and the ruling Alpha formed a bond deeper than mere alliance. The blood ritual isn't just symbolic, it creates a connection that allows the human to channel Lycan power, while giving the Alpha Pack a deeper connection to the human world. Understanding dawned slowly, heat rising to my cheeks as the implication became clear. You mean, all my ancestors were bound to mine, yes, he finished, not always by choice in the beginning, but by necessity. Over time, most found their partnerships grew into something more meaningful. And my father? I asked, my voice barely audible. Raven's expression darkened. Your father refused that aspect of the pact. He fulfilled the blood ritual requirements but rejected the deeper bond. It was his right. The bond cannot be forced, but it weakened the connection between our peoples. When he disappeared, the bond fractured entirely. I turned away, needing space to process this revelation. So when you said I belonged with you now, I meant as my mate, he stated simply, the words sending a shiver through me that had nothing to do with the night air. My equal, my queen. I spun back to face him, anger suddenly flaring. And you didn't think this was something I should know from the beginning? You've been preparing me for a ritual that will bind me to you for life, and you're only telling me now. To my surprise, a look almost like shame crossed his features. I feared you would run, that you would reject the bond outright before understanding its importance, its power. His voice grew softer. Before knowing me. The vulnerability in those last words disarmed my anger, replacing it with confusion. Why would it matter if I knew you or not? If the bond is necessary for the ritual. The ritual requires blood freely given, he interrupted. The mating bond requires something more, acceptance, willingness. His eyes held mine, burning with an intensity that stole my breath. Desire. That word, spoken in his deep voice, sent heat coursing through me. I struggled to maintain my composure, to think logically despite the emotions swirling within me. What happens if I refuse the mating bond but still perform the blood ritual? I asked, needing to understand my options. The ritual would be less powerful but still effective, he answered honestly. The darkness would be pushed back, though not as completely. You would serve as liaison, moving between Wolf's Hollow and the village. He paused. But you would never fully belong to either world. And if I accept? The question came out as barely more than a whisper. Raven moved closer, not touching me, but near enough that I could feel the heat radiating from him. You would become my queen. The pack would be yours to command alongside me. Your power would grow beyond what any Hayes has achieved in generations. His voice deepened. And you would never be alone again. That last promise struck a chord deep within me. Alone. I had been alone for so long, even surrounded by my village, an outcast. Never belonging. Always watching from the periphery. Here, among wolves, I had found more acceptance in days than in years among humans. Do you even want me? I asked suddenly, needing to know if this was merely duty to him. Or am I just a necessary component in maintaining your power? The question seemed to surprise him. For a moment, his carefully controlled expression slipped, revealing something raw and honest beneath. He reached out slowly, giving me time to retreat if I wished, and brushed his fingertips along my jawline. From the moment I saw you by the river, Eleanor Hayes, I knew you were mine, he said, his voice rough with emotion. Not because of prophecy or duty, but because something in you called to something in me. The tears on your face, the defiance in your eyes, even as your heart broke. You were magnificent. His words washed over me, igniting something primal and hungry in my core. Before I could second-guess myself, I stepped forward, eliminating the distance between us. Show me, I demanded softly. Show me what this bond would mean. His eyes darkened, pupils expanding until only a thin ring of amber remained. With deliberate slowness, he lowered his head until his lips hovered just above mine, his breath warm against my skin. "Are you certain?" he murmured, giving me one final chance to retreat. In answer, I closed the remaining distance, pressing my lips to his. The contact was like touching lightning. Energy surged between us, wild and ancient, as his arms wrapped around me, pulling me firmly against him. The kiss deepened, his mouth claiming mine with a hunger that matched the growing need inside me. I could feel his control slipping, something wilder emerging in the way his hands gripped my waist, the rumbling sound that vibrated from his chest. When we finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, his eyes had changed, not fully wolf, but no longer entirely human, the amber irises glowing in the darkness. "Eleanor," he growled, my name sounding like a prayer and a possession all at once. "If we continue this, I know," I said, surprising myself with the steadiness in my voice. "I'm not afraid of you, Raven." A smile, genuine, almost boyish, transformed his face. "Perhaps you should be," he teased, though his eyes remained intense. "The bond between alpha and mate is powerful. Once formed, it cannot be broken except by death." "Forever is a long time," I acknowledged, the weight of the decision pressing on me. "But living half a life, belonging nowhere completely, that seems like the greater burden." He studied my face, searching for any hesitation. "You don't need to decide tonight," he said finally, though I could sense his restraint. "The ceremony is tomorrow. You have until then to choose." I nodded, grateful for the reprieve, even as part of me already knew what my answer would be. "Thank you." He brushed a strand of hair from my face, his touch lingering. "Whatever you decide, know this. You have already changed Wolf's Hollow. Changed me." He stepped back, visibly pulling his control around him like a cloak. "Rest now. Tomorrow will test us both, regardless of your choice." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving me on the battlements with swollen lips and a mind full of possibilities I'd never dared imagine. The day of the full moon dawned clear and cold. I woke to find ceremonial garments laid out, a gown of deep forest green embroidered with silver symbols that matched the carvings on the standing stones. With it came a circlet of silver leaves designed to crown my pale blonde hair. As the sun began its descent, Serena came to escort me from my chambers. "It's time," she said simply, her usual briskness softened by what might have been respect. She led me through the fortress to the courtyard, where the entire pack had assembled. They parted silently as I approached, creating a path to where Raven stood waiting. He too wore ceremonial attire, black leather adorned with silver, a cloak of midnight blue fastened with his silver wolf brooch. But it was his expression that caught my breath. A mixture of pride, anticipation, and something deeper that made my heart race. Behind him, horses waited to carry us to the Moonstone Circle. The journey passed in tense silence, the weight of what was to come hanging heavy in the air. By the time we reached the sacred site, the full moon was rising, casting its silver light over the ancient stones. The pack formed a circle around the perimeter, as Raven led me to the central altar. Upon it rested a silver knife, a wooden bowl, and my tapestry, the one the village had rejected, now spread out as part of the ceremony. "The time has come," Raven announced, his voice carrying to every member of the pack. "The bond between Lycan and human will be renewed this night." He turned to me then, his amber eyes reflecting the moonlight. "Eleanor Hayes, descendant of Mara, bearer of the sight, do you come willingly to fulfill your ancestral duty?" The formal question required a formal answer, one I had practiced for days. "I come of my own will, to bind our peoples once more." A ripple of approval went through the watching pack. Raven nodded, satisfied, and held out the ceremonial knife. "Blood freely given renews the ancient promise." I accepted the knife, its weight surprisingly light in my hand. Without hesitation, for hesitation would signal doubt, I drew the blade across my palm, allowing my blood to flow into the wooden bowl. Raven did the same, his blood mingling with mine. As our blood mixed, I felt the first stirrings of power, the sight expanding, reaching out to the energies contained within the stone circle. Raven began to speak the ancient words, and I joined him, our voices twining together as the ritual prescribed. The mixed blood began to glow softly as we chanted, the energy building between us, around us. I felt it rising through the earth, channeling through my body, seeking connection. This was the moment, the critical juncture where I must choose whether to accept just the blood bond or the deeper mating connection as well. I met Raven's eyes over the glowing bowl, seeing the question there, the waiting. In that moment, all my doubts fell away. I had never belonged in the village, always sensing I was meant for something more. Here, with this powerful being who looked at me as though I were equally powerful, I had found my place. Deliberately, I deviated from the traditional words, adding the phrase that Serena had taught me, the one that would signify my acceptance of the full bond. Blood to blood, heart to heart, soul to soul. I bind myself to you, as you bind yourself to me. Surprise and fierce joy blazed in Raven's eyes as he responded with the complimentary phrase. Blood and heart and soul accepted. I claim you as mine, as you claim me as yours. The energy between us exploded into blinding light, surging outward through the stone circle and beyond. I felt it racing across the land, purifying, renewing, pushing back the darkness that had begun to encroach. But more than that, I felt Raven, his presence in my mind, his emotions intertwining with mine, a connection that transcended the physical. When the light finally faded, I found myself still standing, though leaning heavily against the altar. Raven's hand covered mine, our blood-smeared palms pressed together. Around us, the pack had fallen to their knees, even Victor, their heads bowed in recognition of the power they had witnessed. "It is done," Raven announced, his voice thick with emotion. "The pact is renewed. The Queen of Wolves has risen." He turned to me then, lifting our joined hands for all to see. My mate, my queen, my Eleanor. As the pack howled their acceptance into the night sky, Raven pulled me into his arms, sealing our bond with a kiss that promised eternity. And for the first time in my life, I knew with absolute certainty that I was exactly where I belonged, not cast aside and forgotten, but cherished, powerful, and home at